My name is Philip Harrelson, and I would like to welcome you again to the Barnabas study. And I have had a load of books to stack up over the last several months, and I have not done any book reviews for a little bit, and so I'm going to do several here today and drop them out over the next couple of weeks or so. And I certainly would like to point out a pastor up in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, Brother Tony Mancino. Huge blessing to me personally. And this man has sent me so many just good, solid volumes. And so what I chose to do, I've got a stack of books that Brother Mancino has sent to me, and I'm going to do several book reviews and try to keep in mind the time, try to keep them under 8 to 10 minutes or so, something like that. But these books are certainly a worthy investment if you're a minister, especially if you're a preacher, to add to your library. And so I'd like to talk to you about some of those books here. And the first one I want to talk to you about is a book called The Heart of the Preacher. The subtitle, Preparing Your Soul to Proclaim the Word, written by Rick Reed. And I will put the link down up under the video so that you can purchase that book if you choose to do so. It's gotten several very good book reviews. In fact, the foreword is written by Brian Chappell. And if you're not familiar with Brian Chappell, you certainly need to avail yourself of his book, which is a book that's called Christ-Centered Preaching. This is a classic book. I read this book probably at least 20 years ago. This right here. I think this is the third. Yeah, this is the third edition. And I read this book, the first edition. I was still working in the cath lab at the hospital, and I read this book, and I put it in my backpack, and at the end of the day, I would, especially if I was on call and couldn't leave the hospital, I would stay and read that book. And then here I am chasing a rabbit trail. But anyways, if you have Logos Bible software, there is a section that you can get one of their learning modules, and that book and Professor Chappell's lectures on preaching, very helpful for that. But Brian Chappell wrote the foreword for this book, The Heart of a Preacher. And the contents is broken up into two parts. The first part is called The Testing of the Preacher's Heart, and then the second one is called Strengthening the Preacher's Heart. And there's just some of the chapters in the testing part: ambition, comparison, boasting, insignificance, laziness, stagnating, speaking one language, fear, retreating, criticism, disengaged listeners, Blue Mondays, don't we know about that? Failure, pain, quitting. And then in the second part, the strengthening of the preacher's heart is practice personal soul care, devote yourself to prayer and the Word, stay on the expository path, right-size your expectations, develop internal security, make the most of Saturday nights through the work of an evangelist, don't kill the horse, and keep your first love. And then he's got several author subject indexes and that sort of thing. I want to talk about just maybe about 3 of those chapters that just kind of give you a flavor of the book. One of the chapters that he talks about the matter of comparison, and I know that there's a variety of different skills that preachers have. Obviously, all of us, certainly, and I'm putting myself in that category, we're not conference level preachers. However, years ago I read a little book by Neil Wiseman, H.B. London, and it's called Cultivating the Pastor's Soul. And it talked about being a great preacher wherever you are planted. And I really think there's some benefit to that no matter where you are at, that there can be that matter, that you just develop everything you can do to effectively work where that you are. And this chapter deals with some of that, the matter of comparison. And we a lot of times we'll compare our abilities with other preachers. We'll compare our opportunities. We'll compare our impact. And sometimes we even compare our perks that we have compared to other places. But keep in mind that where the Lord has called you to, that there's a specific reason that He has you there. And He even gives some things to kind of help us to get through those matters of comparison. He says, kill it quickly. He said, you won't find comparison mentioned in the works of the flesh in Galatians 5:19 through 21, but comparisons really are something that as he talks about really is fueled by a competitive spirit, which a lot of times is the root cause of that is pride. And if you are a proud preacher, it won't take long before that starts coming out in your preaching and your teaching style. He says that, so the comparison conundrum, what are we to do? Kill it quickly. Use it wisely. I think that the comparison part is that obviously that if you do use it wisely, then it can be a motivator instead of just being this crushing, discouraging matter of your own personal ministry. You can use that to cause you to step to a little higher place. I've written about this on my blog several times. This seems to be a theme that kind of presses through some of the writing that I've done. But you keep in mind in Matthew 25, the parables that are there, it talks about the 1 talent, the 2 talent, and the 5 talent fellow. And all of us are gifted with varying matters of ability. And I think that at the root or that the root of this that we have to keep in mind is, what are my motives? And recently I have spent a fair amount of time in the book of Revelation. I did a study where that it kind of pairs up that we're going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ and that the Lord is going to test our motives. And that's a very challenging matter to know that one of these days the Lord is going to test what my motives were for ministry. And if my motives were motivated by the material part, buildings, budgets, how much that we contributed to various offerings, or how many people that we had in the building, if those were the things that drove us as pastors or preachers, then all of that literally is going to burn up. But if your calling was to encourage spiritual growth in people, or even to cause them to desire a hunger for the Word and true spiritual transformation to take place in their lives, that's the goal of what we're trying to do. And so the chapter on comparisons really was helpful to that. Another chapter, chapter 6, he talks about stagnation, and starts out the story telling a deal about a fellow that was a baseball player, and basically just a average guy, and he had a coach that started working with him, and he kind of changed up some of his matter of work. I'm finding that I've gotten some calls and some interaction here recently with some men that are in their 40s. I'm mid 50s now, and they've talked to me about preaching and a certain level of stagnation that has come in as they start looking at their preaching style. And again, that's my argument for expository preaching, because if you preach topically only, then all you're doing is just rearranging, generally speaking, rearranging material that you have already learned. But if you really take a serious shot at expository preaching, it keeps you from getting stagnated. And he talks about this matter of looking for a coach, and again, life coaches, various things like that. I think that some of that's overdone. A lot of self-help books, and basically they all say the same thing. They're interested in my money. and interested in me paying whatever subscription fees, but do I have a spiritual coach, somebody that is goading me on to pray, to preach, to speak, to give myself to spiritual matters? Do I have somebody like that? And that's what this chapter speaks about. It talks about the matter of just working hard to move beyond the matter of stagnation. And then the last chapter that I want to mention to you, and let's see, there are a total of 25 chapters in this book, and this book is a little over 200 pages. But chapter 18 talks about stay on the expository path. And again, we as preaching, I look back at preaching from my days in Bible college, which was the late 80s, early 90s. Most Pentecostal preaching has been geared toward topical and or text. You grab a thought, you create an illustration, or find an illustration, and you build a message around that illustration. Expository preaching does not work like that. What it does is you work with the text, and then as you develop the text, it gets into your heart and in your spirit. And if you have an illustration, I really feel like that a lot of illustration needs to work with the Old Testament, pulling out, or even the Gospels, historical part of the book of Acts, that we can use the Scriptures to illustrate some of those things where that we're at. But in Ezra chapter 7 and verse 10, the Bible says, "For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel." Setting your heart involves establishing some core convictions. And then as you begin to develop that, I think that we ought to teach the statutes and the rules here. I think this is the ESV that Reed is using here in this text. But what are you doing with your preaching? And again, I have mentioned to some of these men that have called me that it's a very disciplined and rigorous approach. You've got to be disciplined, and you have to work with the text. It's not going to be a Saturday night special where you're able just to wake up and be like Samson and pray and bang, the Spirit fall on you, and you go from there. There's got to be a concerted effort toward that. But he does mention this matter to adapt a line from the poet Robert Frost. Two roads diverge in the homiletical woods, and at that homiletical fork, you can do one of two things. The expository path, the road less traveled. I would say this, there are some things that it does for your church, and he brings this out. There's more authority that are in what you're preaching. There's more nourishment that you find. People will start reading their Bibles. They'll start looking at their Bibles in a different way. There'll be more variety in your messages that you preach. And it's amazing how that there have been times where that I have just worked through, developed, and there's been now, I've been doing it for quite a while, and I've got numerous series that I have worked through. And it's always amazing to me how that whenever you start to preach that text, that the current events that are taking place around you, it's almost like the word was tailor-made for what was taking place. And so Rick Reed does talk about some of that. And so again, I would just recommend this book to you, The Heart of a Preacher by Rick Reed. And again, this is one of the, Brother Mancino sent me right at 400 books, and these are quality, hardbound, excellent books, and so I would just recommend you to read this book here. So anyways, thank you for stopping in, and hopefully this book review has kind of whetted your appetite a little bit to go out, and books are like tools. And you can use cheap tools, or you can use tools that's going to cost you a little bit, but at the end of the day, if it deposits something into your spirit and into your life, it's well worth whatever you would pay for it. Lord bless you, and until next time, I'll see you later.